Great. Welcome everyone. We're going to wait just like a minute or two to let people join. Looks like we already have about 60 participants. Expecting a couple more to join over the next few minutes. While you are waiting, feel free to either enter this link right here or you can scan the QR code. We are going to be raffling off a free entrance to our PM recruiting bootcamp that's happening in a couple weeks. And you can enter for free. One of you will be winning. We'll be announcing the winner at the end of the session. And then you can learn more details about the bootcamp later. Okay, great. Well, welcome everyone to the Path to Product Management, Creating a Standout Candidacy event. We're really excited to get going. We have two amazing panelists and want to jump right into talking to them. So a few questions, or I guess logistics, ask questions in the chat. Both me and the panelists will be responding to them. Be respectful. There's a lot of people on the call. These panelists are very kind to be taking time out of their very busy days to be talking to us. And then finally, you will have access to this recording. It will be sent via email after the event. Great. So quick agenda. We're going to do intros. We'll jump right into the panel and then a final word at the end. Starting with the intros. So I'm Mike. I do product at Leland. I'll be hosting tonight's event. There's also Erica and Amanda on the call. They'll be dropping links in the chat. And then our panelists. So why don't we actually start, Aaliyah, let's start with you. And then Tori, if you want to follow, just doing a really quick intro on yourself.
Yeah, of course. Hey everyone, I'm Aaliyah. I graduated from Cornell a couple of years ago and immediately went into consulting. I was doing tech consulting, and then someone was asking me if I knew about PM. So I'd say it was a bit of an untraditional role. I had no idea what it was, but after figuring out, I was like, wait, this thing actually seems kind of cool. I got put onto it, then heard about Meta's RPM program, and in about a couple of weeks, all went through the process of like applying and figuring out how to like do these interviews, which were totally different from anything I've done. And then, yeah, I'm here now. I'm going to start in September. So still in that transition between consulting and PM, but I'm sure you'll hear about it today. I'm excited to just speak about my process and yeah.
Great. Thank you. Tori, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Leland panel. Thanks for joining. My name is Tori. I'm currently a PM at TikTok. Before that, I was at Google for 11 years, starting out in engineering and then ending in product management. Started out in my career studying computer science and political science. Actually started out in politics on the Obama campaign, then the White House, and then ended up transferring over to Google, which is where I knew I ultimately wanted to work in engineering and product. It's been really such a gift to meet with clients on the side through Leland and really help them to realize their goals and gain their confidence and build out their skill set and frameworks to get the position that they want in product management and beyond. So I'm really excited to have this discussion with you all today. And looking forward to the next hour.
Yeah, this is so great. I love how both of you have such unique paths into product management. Often when we do these events, people are like, I'm already a couple years into my career. Is it too late for me? What does the path look like? So really excited to hear more about your perspective. Okay, we'd love to hear about you. So if you haven't already, feel free to drop who you are, where you're at. Are you working? Are you studying? And then because this is product management event, what your favorite product is. And then you can just drop that in the chat. This is usually my favorite part of the events to start to see the different intros coming in and seeing all the different people we have. So while you're doing that, we're going to move on. If you are not familiar with Leland, Leland is a marketplace where we want to be your one-stop shop to help you achieve your most ambitious career and professional goals. Very tactically, how that works is there are three offerings. The first is one-on-one coaching, where you can meet with Tori, Aaliyah, or any of the 1,200 incredible coaches we have on the platform to work one-on-one on how you should be achieving your goal. We also have live courses or boot camps where we'll be covering like multi-sessions of how to do a certain thing, like maybe breaking into management consulting, breaking into product, applying to law school, etc. And then finally, we have a content library called the Leland Plus that has thousands of mock interviews, resumes, cover letters, etc., to help you develop the skills you need to be applying to companies. And then we're proud to say that it's working. Every year, tens of thousands of people break into incredible companies or schools. I'm actually a former Leland customer myself, and now I'm a coach on the platform. And you can get help with really anything, whether it's reviewing your LinkedIn, creating a resume, practicing the different mock interviews or case interviews that you'll be doing. Your coach is there to help you work towards your goals. So with that preface, we're now excited to jump into the panel, the most valuable part of this event. And so let's just jump right into it. Tori, why don't we start with you? I know you were just talking at a high level, but would love to hear more specifically about your process of breaking into product. And then Aaliyah, same thing, you already kind of talked about it, but would love to hear more in depth about what that process was like.
Yeah, great question. So I think I realized I wanted to work in product management really before I even joined tech and before product manager was even like a term. I was really drawn to studying computer science and political science because I grew up in a pretty humble environment, dairy farming and building tools and everyday solutions. So the farm would run. And also as a first gen student and a Pell Grant recipient, I really believed and saw the benefit of building pathways for people. And so for me, I always knew I wanted to build products. There wasn't necessarily a formalized job to lead the strategy of product building until maybe around 2007 to 2010. I started out first in the engineering team, first within the government, first on the Obama campaign. And then when I joined Google, started out generally as like a TPM within the engineering team. From there, the term product manager was becoming more and more popular as somebody who would work cross-functionally, help strategize for the product vision, the feature priorities of the product, target demographics, how we want to bring it to market, how do we build product market fit and grow the product. And through that, through an internal transfer, I was able to become a product manager. And so for me, it was, early on, kind of doing some soul searching and understanding how I best operate, what are my value systems. And from there, falling into product management because it really reflected what I wanted to do and what I believed in. Product management 15 years later, it's not just somebody that works exclusively in engineering like I do as a feature PM. It's monetization, it's business operations. It's a very broad-based field. And so one of the first questions I ask people is, there's many different roles within product management, but ultimately, like, what drives you and what are you okay with standing to build an end result? Because even if it's diverse, there's a lot of unifying factors of being a PM, like thinking about strategy, being user obsessed, being analytical and technical, that are kind of like the ties that bond these different roles. So, reflecting on my background and how I became a product manager, I would also really encourage you to do that as well. Is this something that you understand? Is this something that you really want to live in day to day? And from there, thankfully, with a coach and mentors, you can find pathways to getting there. But yeah, that's how I ended up in product management after Google. I ended up leaving after 11 years for Harvard Business School, where I kind of fine-tuned more ideas I had. I thought about building a venture, ultimately fell into working at TikTok, which I've been loving the past 3.5 years, working in AR effects. Product management is a really exciting career to have. I love reading people's backgrounds and kind of their own motivations, and I'm excited to see what type of PM they'll be. But I hope that my story and Aaliyah's as well can shed light that there's, no right, set path to becoming a PM. I look forward to talking more about this with you all.
That's so great. Aaliyah, before we jump into your story, just a quick follow-up for you, Tori. So you're at Google, you're working as a software engineer, and you know that you want to be more involved in the product side, eventually you make that internal transfer. Tell us a little bit more about like how you set yourself up for that. Was that just like you let your managers know, hey, I'm interested in product? Were you specifically trying to build any skills? Was there
Yeah.
anything you did that worked well?
Yeah, and this is definitely something that I'm sure both Aaliyah and I both work on with our clients. The idea of understanding the role and also understanding your gaps and upskilling is really important before you start entering the field and applying. So for me, I had to really educate myself on what is the day-to-day responsibilities of PM and what's expected of me. What do I currently know from that rubric and what are my gaps? And so for me, a big part of becoming a PM was really brushing up more on data science and finding ways to understand the market and the user, knowing things like R in Python and SQL, and knowing all the tools and platforms to be able to kind of dig in and understand and build competitor analyses and understand opportunities and gaps that exist. So that was one. Another one that I was able to fine tune more in business school was finance and accounting as well. When you're thinking about an idea, especially when you're in a startup, you really need to think about like market viability and think about things like cap table analyses and understanding a product in a business holistically is so important as a PM. And so, absolutely, I had to upskill. I had to know what the responsibilities were going to be like, especially because it's a job where you have no direct reports typically, unless you're a group product manager. You're working with XFN, you're rolling up your sleeves, you're doing anything for the sake of the product, and you're wearing so many hats. So I would really recommend you do the same as well.
That's so great. I love the figuring out what is the criteria they're looking for at my specific company, and then where am I lacking and going about and building that.
Yeah.
I think obviously it depends a lot on the company. Like Google is so big that there's a lot of data they're working with and optimizing features, and so
Yeah.
data science matters a ton. In a startup, like you mentioned, it may be more finance and accounting because that's so important to the business. Really, really great.
Absolutely. In a startup, it's other considerations like uh, investor and stakeholder relationships. And are you reaching expected milestones? And what is your burn rate? And how much runway do you have? And so, as a PM, that's very important to do as well. And that's a little bit different from a more advanced company like Google.
Yep, that's great. Okay, Aaliyah, we now want to hear your perspective. I guess some context if people are not familiar. Aaliyah's going to Meta through their RPM program, is that correct? Which like they get, I don't know, 20,000 people every year who apply and like 50 of them get offers or like I don't know the exact number, but it's something like 0.1% of people. So a very competitive application process. So would love to hear specifically as you talk about your process, how you went about preparing for these very difficult and competitive interviews.
Yeah, of course. Also, thanks, sorry for your insight. It's so interesting hearing like the different stages of like what a PM goes through. So, okay, like I said a bit earlier, I got into PM like a bit more untraditionally. So I studied economics in college and information science. Then I thought I wanted to do the whole like consulting or banking, get into that. But because I was in tech consulting, which kind of happened accidentally, they just put me in that. Um, I started to think about what's it that I like at work and what's it I don't like at work. And then I was just sitting down with some of my friends chatting, saying, okay, I like, thinking about what do my clients want, what are their pain points, what are we changing, kind of like designing what they're doing, but also working with them on a day-to-day basis, testing it, almost the PM aspects being that like glue between all the teams, but I didn't like the other parts of it. And I was like, what job is almost managing that aspect of the product that we're building, but not doing the actual consulting stuff. And I found myself almost like networking to get on all these like PM roles in consulting. Then someone was like, why don't you just do actual PM? Which, like I said, I wasn't really that familiar with when I was recruiting when I was leaving college. So after just like networking with other people who did PM, trying to figure out how is it that I can break into it when I didn't really have that background, or I mean, like I said, didn't like prep for those intense interviews or know about like Meta's RPM program like years before like other candidates. So it was like this huge challenge, but I was like just super interested and I just felt like this was just something that was perfect for me, right? So I'd say the first part was really just like networking, truly knowing, Tori touched on this, truly knowing what is it that you're looking for, what is it that like a PM at that specific company does, and then almost like fitting your skills and like seeing. I'd say a big part is like the interviews. If you like the interviews, I'd say they always say if you like the interviews, you'd almost like the job. And I was actually doing the interviews and like liking to do them, like, oh, like this is so cool. Like, what would I build for people who are like senior citizens using Uber, like just the most strangest concepts, but I found it so exciting, something that I think I'd enjoy doing every day. Then I did the interviews rounds and rounds and finally made it. And yeah, I'd say that was my process through the whole thing.
That's awesome. Really, I loved you talking about uh, like you didn't even know what product was, and then when you figured out that yes, this is what I want to do, it sounds like you had to start practicing the interviews, and as you were preparing for it, then you kind of realized, no, this is really something I want to do. That's something I've talked to my clients a lot, where product is really competitive as an industry, and it takes a lot of effort to break into product. But for certain personalities, it's absolutely worth it. Like there's maybe not a job that they'd find as much satisfaction in. And so like once you know that about yourself, you just got to commit and whatever it takes, like I'm going to learn the skills I need to learn. I'm going to do the mock interviews I need to do so that I'm ready. Really, really great responses. Okay, let's move on. Actually, wait, this is like a good follow-up question. So these are really competitive processes, and let's talk about what people can do to differentiate themselves. Tori, let's go back to you, and then Aaliyah, if there's anything you want to add, would love to hear your perspective as well.
Yeah, for certain. I mean, first and foremost, I loved Aaliyah's point about um, really diving into and committing to and loving the interview process, which is really validation that you might love being a PM as well, because a lot of companies have done a great job basically simulating what it's like to be a PM with the different types of interviews, from product sense to technical to more design and systems to XFN and behavioral. So that first and foremost, just really commit to and give yourself the time and the effort to enjoy this process. Because I swear it's going to prep you well for being a PM and the realities of it. And I think you're going to learn a lot about yourself in the process. So there's a lot of things that I would recommend, whether with a coach or on your own, if you really want to differentiate yourself. And as a caveat as well, I think it's really important to stay grounded and to not give up, especially in this job market. This is probably the worst job market I've ever seen in tech, aside from 2009. And just don't take, um, a ghosting or not getting a position. Uh, I would even say, heavily or seriously, it's just a reflection of the market and not necessarily on you. So first and foremost, what I would recommend is just really do your research first. Understand the role of being a product manager, just like Aaliyah and I were mentioning earlier. What is a PM? Why is it multifaceted? What are the origins of it? What are the day-to-day responsibilities of being a PM? And from there, what types of PMs exist as well? And what are those roles like depending on the company size or the focus of said company, from e-commerce to more technical tools and platforms to entertainment? That may vary because product management is a very diverse career choice now. The second thing that I would do as well is, once you've fully really understood the reality of what a product manager is and what this industry looks like and what the jobs are, is to look internally as well. Just like I mentioned with my strengths and gaps, um, match an average prerequisite or key responsibilities or requirements for your dream job at, say, Meta, for the RPM program. What are they expecting you to know, or to at least start learning ahead of time, and match that to what you currently know? From there, you can start identifying key gaps that you need to perhaps build a skill set on, and seek out certificate programs, your own work, even watching YouTube videos and doing reading to start brushing up on these skills. I would say, as a shortcut, to be honest, a lot of the top tech companies give you public facing websites with essentially what they expect you to know. All the different types of interview cohorts, from analytical to technical to, again, XFN, and from there you can read their guides and get a sense of what are the skills that they're looking for in somebody. So from there, I would really, again, focus on upskilling between learning the tools to adequately serve customer obsession, data-driven decisions, technical acumen, and then communication and collaboration. A coach or your own research or speaking with mentors can maybe point you in the right direction on how to fill those gaps. I would also, from there, really start looking at what are the target jobs I have, and how can I craft my resume to show that I've demonstrated what they're looking for in a candidate. And again, just comparing yourself to your strengths and weaknesses as well. What am I currently missing in my resume, and how could I upskill in my career in the short term to show that I am willing to enter the role of PM, that I have tested myself previously, and that I am very excited about these roles. So, for example, one thing that I recommend people do is if there's side projects they can volunteer for at their current company. Google had 20% work. That's one of the things that got me to my next role. What type of internal coursework does your company have? What startups in your area are looking for more generalist PMs where you could maybe start out low level and learn the basics through doing? So there's a lot of things you can do initially on your own and with the guidance of a mentor or a coach to start fine tuning how you get from point A to point B and really differentiate yourself. I know there's a lot more that I would love to say, but I want to give Aaliyah the floor as well, and happy to kind of spitball.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. This question is almost like asking a professional like basketball player, like, how do I score? It's like, well, there's like so much I can unpack here. Uh, so thanks for the high level overview. Those were so good. I especially want a big +1 to side projects. That is where I've seen a lot of success, especially with more early career applicants who are trying to get into these competitive programs. Your own like personal projects is a really good way of demonstrating expertise. Okay, Aaliyah, I want to hear your perspective on this same question.
Yeah, so I think I come in with a bit of a different perspective here because I didn't have much like technical background going in, but I was applying for like more of that beginning role. But I think I love that response about you should know what the company is looking for, you should have that tech background and really make that match. But something that I think people overlook is also that like personality and like that presence when you're actually doing your interviews and really thinking about like a fit for the actual company. So just to like get a bit more into that, I think when you're doing your interviews, at the end of the day, like product managers, like I said earlier, they're that glue between all the teams. They're really like running everything. So really just being able to show that you're confident, you're able to lead, you're able to drive outcomes. It's something that I think interviewers really look for and that it can set you apart from another candidate. And I think a lot of the times people are able to like SWOT or they have all of this knowledge behind them, but really being able to sound like structured and just show that you understand products in like a very different way. Like a tip that I tell all of like my coachees is why don't you think about the product from like a more empathetic way? So like what's the users actually thinking about? And then like design based on that, which really shows that you're not just thinking, okay, every product needs to have one, two, and three, but rather like tailoring to what you know the product needs, right? So really just like those are the things that say really sets you out from other candidates. People remember you more. And also just like taking your interviews or taking the products, like I said earlier, as almost like a conversation, like make it more fun. So yes, like you have your frameworks, you have the things you're supposed to do. But when someone asks you a question, they're almost trying to see you in like their company atmosphere as if they went to you as a PM, like, hey, like these metrics are down. Like, what do you think we should do? So rather than immediately jumping in and saying, okay, like the goal is this, and then these are the metrics, be like, okay, let's think about this here. Like, actually having like a conversation about it and showing that, again, you have that personality, you'd be someone they want to work with. And that's what really makes the difference, I think, in an interview.
Yeah, I love that so much. I don't know what your experience was like, but I remember the first time I heard a product interview question, and like my like stomach dropped, and I was like, I have no clue how to answer what you just described. Like I was so nervous. I can't remember what it was, but it was something like improve YouTube or like design an alarm clock for the blind, or like one of those like more stereotypical um product case questions. And it took so long to get to a point that I felt comfortable where my personality could show. And so sometimes it just takes a lot of practice to get there. However, if you practice too much, you get like robotic and you just like fall into your framework. So finding the right balance of how can I be authentic while also knowing what I'm doing. Really, really great insights. Okay, we've talked about this a little bit. I guess I'll keep it vague to hear if you have any unique perspectives that haven't been added already. So, Tori, why don't you start us off, and then Aaliyah, you can wrap it up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this relates a little bit to the previous question as well. But like I mentioned, there's a lot of different type of PM roles these days, from monetization to more technical feature to marketing and e-commerce PM. But I think the tie that brings them together is really, I think, 4 or 5 competencies. So one is really, have you demonstrated that you can really understand target customers and their needs? So some of the skill sets required for that is, can you do market research? Do you understand the tools and means to build competitive analysis reports? I'm kind of giving a very high level bird's eye view, so I'm happy to kind of, by the way, drill down on some of these, but just to stay concise, can you build competitive analyses? Can you find potential gaps that exist that users may love a solution for? Beyond customer obsession, can you demonstrate data-driven decision making? So have you used user logging analysis tools before? Have you built your own metrics? Like, have you tracked them before and built insights from them? Have you built reports as well? The next thing I would recommend in terms of skills for PMs is some level of technical acumen. You don't need to be a software engineer, but you need to at least know how things are built. Because a PM, like Aaliyah mentions, works very cross-functionally with not only business side stakeholders, but design and engineering. And if you're focused on pushing out features as a PM, you need to understand how things are built, technical and design considerations, with sprint management and the development and the release of a new feature, of what it looks like to have healthy internal operations, from testing to sprints to t-shirt sizing to prod and postmortems, to make sure that your product is reflective of what the user will expect, and that you don't end up in a lot of technical debt. Another one that I think it's overlooked a lot, which I love that Aaliyah mentioned this before, is XFN, like communication and collaboration. Again, you're not, I would
Looks like we're losing her. Okay, Tori, we are going
a
to.
CEO of a product. You're more of, you're orchestrating all these XFN. Oh,
Oh, you're back. Okay, we lost you for a second.
oh no. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, but so I don't know left off, but I think just to be concise, because we did lose roughly 20 seconds, I think also having some level of technical acumen. You don't need to be a software need to understand how things are built from a design and engineering perspective and what the life of a feature is like. And then one I think that gets overlooked a lot is communication and collaboration. And that's not only working with XFN to aggregate and synthesize ideas and provide recommendations, but it's really being an empathetic person and empowering others to speak up, setting the culture for the product and the engineering and the design teams to work well together. I think that there's sometimes the risk of the loudest person in the room is the right one. It's seldom the case, and one person alone is not building this product. A part of your job as a PM is to empower people and set that culture of collaboration. So these are kind of skills that I would expect from a candidate that I would really encourage them to find pathways to build up their experience in. One other thing that I would recommend is just staying current on trends as well. Sometimes you'll get like a favorite product question randomly. Tell me your favorite product and how you would improve it. Why is it your favorite product? Or they'll randomly ask you about Web3. Just make sure you understand the whole ecosystem of the world that you're applying to as well.
Yeah, that's so great. Really appreciate the thoughts there. I think one thing I'd add, and maybe responding to a question in the chat, you talked a lot about how in the end, like what you need to be good at is what's good for the business. And those are the skills that you need to be figuring out. With side projects, I think there's this misconception. It comes from a lot of people who are in a more traditional like software engineering background, where they're like, I'm gonna go build a really cool website, and that's gonna be my side project. Uh, and while that is totally viable, generally the pattern I have seen is you prove you are a good product manager when you can prove that what you built was the right thing to build. And that's usually done by did this win? I had this client who she was about to go to medical school, decided she didn't want to go to medical school, wanted to break into product, had absolutely no product background at all, had just been doing research, but she had run this Etsy shop where she sold like 30 grand a year in like creative t-shirts. And like that's what got her like really incredible PM offers because she was able to show like all the different PM skills through running this Etsy shop of finding a hole in the market, the way that she would advertise to people, the way that she would work with like different groups of like the manufacturers and the designers. And so in thinking about a side project, you are wanting to show that like I know how to win here. I know what it takes to make a good business. And that can look very different depending on the industries you're in, the stage of the company. But generally, that's how I've seen people be successful. Okay, Aaliyah, take it away.
Yeah, I think Tori definitely covered a lot of it. Like, kind of just to echo what she said, I think that same like communication type of aspect and then like the data decision making, user empathy. If I was to really add on to this, something that I always think about is a huge strength in several jobs, but specifically in PM, is just being able to like navigate ambiguity. Because I feel like there's several moving parts and that I mean, you see it in the interviews, you see it like when you hear what people say they do on a day-to-day basis. It's just how are we going to take like a little bit and find data to like back it up, um, speak to many people, make all of these decisions very quickly to come to just like your final end result. I'd say that's almost like your whole job. So being able to do that with like basically make a lot out of a little bit. So I just say that's another skill that would be
Yeah,
great.
that's so great. All right. Why don't we do reverse order? So Leah, we're gonna go back to you, then to Tori. So um someone is like either thinking about breaking into product or maybe they already have interviews. What should they be doing to prepare?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest thing is mock interviews. So I think it's so nice to sit down, like you hear a question and you like write it down, you have all of your ideas. It seems great. But usually that is such a different story than when you actually open up your mouth, you're speaking to someone, and you're actually doing the interview. Obviously, it's a bit harder to sometimes always have someone. And I'd say have someone who'd give you genuine feedback. And I think that's where coaching can become important because even you do like these apps, sometimes you're matched with someone else, they just like want to hear you speak, then like it's their turn. They're not really like giving you feedback. So really just having someone who will be very honest, will nitpick, say, try this, like this didn't sound structured, I'm lost there, and really just like fixing how you respond. I think that makes the world of a difference. And if you don't always have someone to speak to, almost even recording yourself, because sometimes you think you sound great and then you record yourself, you're like, what am I speaking about? Specifically in those interviews, I think the packaging is very important. So you want to make sure that you're almost speaking in buckets, I like to say. So before you dive into a question, yes, you have a framework, but even like within the framework, at the end of the day, interviewers are there like taking down what you're saying. You want to make it easy for them. It should be, okay, one, two, three, right? This is what I'm going to cover, and I'm covering it because of this. And again, I spoke about this earlier, making your personality shine through, being able to almost make it feel like second nature, but not robotic. And all of that really just sums up that whole mock interview aspect. Obviously, that's if you already have the interview. I think before that, making sure everything's airtight. So your resume, Tori touched on this earlier, making sure that it's very tailored towards the company that you're applying for. I always say there's no such thing as one resume. Every company needs a different resume. You need to, even if it's both PM jobs, it should be, okay, this company, I know they might like this more. So doing your research and tailoring your resume to make sure it's good. Your cover letter, your LinkedIn profile's up to date. So really the whole pre-prep, then I'd say the biggest aspect, the interviews, and then also just like networking to see if it's even a good fit for yourself, making sure that you like the culture of the actual company, that you know what to ask them in the interview, something that's exciting, not just, oh, like what do you do every day, right? So making sure that you're just someone who's remembered, I think super important.
That's so, so great. I remember I once got asked a question in a PM interview that was, tell me every reason you can think of why there's a hole in the top of traffic cones. And just like the most ridiculous question that like you can never prepare for. And I think that's the vibe of PM interviews. Like you will never learn every framework that will perfectly structure you to answer every product question. And so you just need to develop the skill of I am given an abstract problem, I can break it down and I can solve it. And like I trust the process more than I've memorized a perfect answer. And I think it comes down to practice, like you said, of like I just need to build that skill and I build it through practice. And then everything else you mentioned of so much easier said than done to be authentic in an interview. And it just takes doing. Really, really great thoughts. Okay, Tori, if there's anything you want to add, feel free to jump in. If not, we can move to the next question. Okay, let's jump to the next question. Oh, we're going to talk about the PM bootcamp. Then we'll jump to the next question. Okay, great. Well,
Absolutely. I think they did a great job.
oh, Tori, you're cutting in and out. It seems like you're back now. Okay. I guess maybe taking a step back into Leland has been around for about 3.5, almost 4 years now. A common problem we have seen is that many people are going through a very similar process, and they kind of need to know the fundamentals before one-on-one coaching can really be as effective. And so to help people make sure they know every part of the PM recruiting process, we have created a multi-series boot camp for breaking into product. So we touch on everything from getting the interview to like product design, execution interviews, analytical, behavioral, take-home assignments, and kind of everything in between. So uh, the thought is we want to make this as affordable and cheap as possible. So you don't need to buy like 12 hours of one-on-one coaching to learn these skills. Instead, we can get a whole group of people, bundle it together and make it much more affordable. So if you were to buy everything the bootcamp has like one-on-one, it costs about $2,600. We're doing a discount tonight so that it's not the usual $1,200 cost, but $699. If you registered for the free giveaway, you'll be given some more info about the bootcamp and where you can sign up. I believe that Amanda has dropped some links in the chat as well. Okay, great. Thanks, Amanda. And so if you have any questions, you can ask them there. Great. Okay, I want to move right back into questions. Tori, we lost you for a second, so why don't we start with you on this one? What are some ways that aspiring PMs can gain relevant experience? I guess you talked about this a little bit with like the Google 20% time.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, so I think thankfully there's a lot of ways on your own or with a coach. First of all, in your current company, there's probably a lot of opportunities, either internal education, transition programs, or volunteer gigs that you can pursue. So do your research. You can volunteer for cross-functional projects where you can work with engineering and design. You can take ownership of a feature or product improvement by gathering user feedback, defining requirements, and collaborating with stakeholders. You could move laterally into a business analyst, project manager, or operations role that could give you some PM responsibilities, and just like an APM or an RPM rotation can be a nice pathway to a more formal PM role in the future. Like we mentioned before, both Aaliyah and I mentioned you can upskill on more of like the design, technical, metrics, operational end. There's a lot of certificate programs. There's also a lot of reading and upskilling you can do on your own or with a coach. And that also includes something that Mike pointed out, side projects. You can build something on your own to understand the life of a feature or a product. Practice things like, PRDs and stack ranking and sprints and kind of general web development to see what it looks like. You could volunteer or even join full-time an early stage startup, even a civic tech group that your friends or a colleague or somebody that you've just met is running, and you participate as more of like a generalist PM. You could also participate in community events like hackathons, where you could collaborate with designers and engineers and PMs and learn by doing. You could also join PM communities to learn more from others in their field, read subject matter posts, get a pulse of how people think. So there's plenty of communities on platforms like Reddit, LinkedIn, Lenny's newsletter, Slack, Women in Product, Mind the Product as well. And then Aaliyah, I know, can speak better to me than the rotational APM programs, but there's a lot of things you can do on your own that a coach can also give you feedback on.
That's really great. I think you touched on so many awesome points. Aaliyah, anything you would add?
I think Tori pretty much covered most of it. I think the main things, if you don't have any current PM experience, like she said, is trying to find those PM things. I think there are PM skills exist everywhere. So really just like finding what you're doing now and being able to just extract those, and also those side projects, same things, like maybe if you have any startup experience or if you're doing nonprofit work, like I said, it's all there. It's just about how do you extract it and put it in your resume.
Yeah.
And also, I think networking is another good way to get your foot in the door, in the sense where even like beyond referrals, something that really helped me was there's certain like keywords that I didn't even know existed. And after speaking to someone and being like, hey, like I have all these like questions to like answer in my like short answer questions in the application. They're like, make sure you speak about building a product like 0 to 1, like use that specific phrase, or make sure you speak about working cross-functionally. I was like, oh, like I do all these things, but I didn't know to explicitly say them. So I think sometimes networking it's hard because no one's going to go through your whole application with you. But like coaching, that's where it becomes beneficial since they know what it is people are looking for and can help you extract those skills from what you're currently doing.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad you talked about networking. I think if AI has done anything to the job application market, it's like increased the amount of spam that is sent to companies. And therefore, companies need to rely on uh, referrals, like more than they've ever had to rely in the past, because there's just so many applications coming in. And so having someone who can vouch for you to the recruiter does so, so much. Okay, we already talked about this. Uh, Great. This one is like one of my favorite questions. And so I'm really excited to talk about it. let's do reverse order again. So Aaliyah and then Tori. Common mistakes you have seen, either mistakes you made or clients or friends. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the first one that I think about is kind of that like whole being too generic or too robotic type of thing. I think sometimes like when you do mock interviews with people or you're even interviewing yourself, it becomes okay, tell me like the metrics that we'd use to measure success. Then you immediately just start like naming the list you studied last night, right? But it's like, okay, like I understand that you know metrics, but how does this relate to what we're speaking about right now? So really just tying it back to that whole thing about like conversation and like making it seem like you're actually passionate about products, you're passionate to do this. You're not just trying to like get a job, right?
Yep.
So that's like first thing. The next thing I'd actually say is over relying on frameworks. You touched on this a bit earlier. I actually learned two frameworks overall for all my interviews. And I was just like, these are the frameworks I know. I don't have much time to learn anything else. I'm gonna make these work for everything. And they did because at the end of the day, frameworks are made so that you structure your thoughts. They're not made to answer the question, if that makes sense. So trying to use a framework to help you with structure, but sometimes an interviewer is just like asking a question. They don't want you to dive into a whole framework, yeah, right? And I think in your actual interview, you don't always have to say, okay, let's say you're using a framework of like users and pain points and ideas. You don't need to even say those things explicitly. Like you say those words, but you don't need to say, I'm doing this framework, right?
Yep.
So that's another common mistake I see. I'd also say not asking good questions. Sometimes you end up very deep in a hole in your interview if you don't ask the right questions and you if you're just like rushing to answer the question rather than being honest, maybe saying, I'm not clear on that, or like, could you clarify this? So, all of those things are kind of things in the actual interview. I think people make mistakes. In the actual recruiting process, I'd say not knowing what the product is. We've been saying this a lot. So, sometimes people are just like, okay, let me apply to like Meta. That's a big company, right? But do you know the Meta products? Are you actually like interested in doing a specific one? Really just not knowing what you're signing up for, not knowing the company itself and what they're doing. Um, Last thing I'd say in terms of the actual recruiting process is almost like we're talking about like the job market earlier, so almost being just like shut down too early. So saying, okay, like maybe because I didn't study like software engineering, I'm not cut out for this because like this company rejected me, right? So almost like being okay with failure, being able to just like keep shooting your shot, like trying to get out there because you're just like passionate about doing this. And like Tori said, sometimes just the job market itself, it's not you. So just being resilient and pushing through.
That's so great. Tori, anything you would add?
Yeah, I think that there's a few more things. I think Aaliyah gave a great overview. One is I, I think that there's a lot of, again, allure to the name of product manager and equally an allure to the exciting looking roles, such as head of product or AI PM. But there's a lot of positions available, a lot of positions that people overlook because it doesn't seem as enticing. I think that one of my mentors at Google said it best of if you really love if you really love a product management role in the field, it doesn't necessarily matter what team or product you're assigned to because the principles are still there that you need to practice. You need to care about the team and the users that you're serving. And so don't ignore the less exciting sounding roles because, even if they're more junior, or not as quote exciting than others, it's an opportunity for you to learn, practice your leadership skills, learn the fundamentals of product management, and it's a starting point as well. So it's really a privilege even to have that role. The second thing that Aaliyah touched upon was not practicing enough for your interviews. You really need to get to the point with your mock interviews that you can go beyond relying on frameworks themselves and start being creative and showing your personality because a lot of these questions are not necessarily about the answer you provide, but it's how you get to that answer. And the interviewers may also just interrupt you to throw you off as well to see how you react to that. I would say the PM interview in a way that's a great practice for like running a product review as a PM, and dealing with stakeholder alignment and concerns. And so you need to get to the point where you're obsessed over the process of being a PM, where you know the fundamentals, the expectations, and you could also think creatively like a PM. The other thing I think that I see people not do enough is really look inside yourself and think about why you want to be a PM and what is a PM beyond these fundamental skill sets that we went over previously. It's also being, again, a leader, somebody who is going to encourage others to speak up from design and engineering and other XFNs, and synthesize ideas and provide strategy. So it's not going to be the loudest person in the room. It's going to be somebody that's very supportive and thoughtful and cares about users and internal stakeholders. So think about how you could practice being a good friend, being a good coworker, being a good son or daughter, because so many of those elements apply to being a good PM as well. The other thing, again, this goes back to what Aaliyah mentioned as well. Um, I see a lot of people not approaching network thoughtfulness. Sometimes see there's an opportunity to have network become really for the person to connect with. And so that I think hinges upon avoiding a lot of the common tropes like cold connecting with people without context. Only targeting senior leaders. There's plenty of people who are mid-level and junior who have a sites that you can connect with. Asking for a job right away, not doing your homework before you reach out to this individual as well, and only relying on online networking. Go to events like we mentioned as well, network in person, learn by doing, build relationships by doing too. And then on the flip side of networking, an over-reliance on networking. This goes back to something that we mentioned earlier in the of what are the strengths that you have, what are the gaps that you have as well, and really put yourself on a trajectory by doing your homework and preparing to be a competitive candidate.
Okay, Tori, I think we're losing you again.
The
Um, okay, you're coming back a little bit. Okay, that great thoughts, and I really appreciated your thoughts on networking specifically. I think there is so much there that people mess up on, and like that can really be a game-changing part of the application. Okay, we're really short on time, so why don't we just spend like 1 minute each on the next two questions, then we can wrap it up. So, Aaliyah, why don't we start with you? Generally, like how have you worked with people or how can you help people go through the PM recruiting process?
Yeah, so the first thing we do usually is like the intro call. And there it's really just trying to discover what would you say like your biggest weaknesses or where are you in the process because everyone is different. Everyone needs different like things, I'd say. So that's like how I'd start. But then when we're actually working through it, I like to prioritize mock interviews since I think that's what makes the big difference. But again, if someone's trying to get interviews, then we'd be prioritizing step by step, maybe like resume prep, like cover letters, LinkedIn, how to network, which companies to target, really just tailoring it for what's their best case scenario, worst case scenario, what are they looking for, and finding that match. But then the interview process, so kind of like what we've touched on this whole time, all of those tips, all of those little like little like secret flares that really like make yourself like memorable is something that I love to work with my coachees on. And I say the biggest thing is just honest feedback. Maybe it's like you notice someone, they're like not structuring their questions really well, or they're not understanding something, and really just telling them, fix this, maybe work from there, and finding just a framework that works for them because I wouldn't say every framework works for everyone. Like we all think differently, right? So again, drilling that interview process. And then almost just making them feel confident at the end of it, right before their interviews. I think that's the biggest thing, making them chill off before, say, okay, stop interviewing, your interview is tomorrow. This is the final thing. And yeah, I'd say that's pretty much the timeline or the structure on how I like to go.
That's so great. I love that, like, you don't know what you don't know and helping people know what they should be knowing. Sometimes that's, hey, like, you're doing this wrong and you need to change this. And then sometimes it's, no, you've met the bar. Like, stop stressing. You're good. Tori, how do you generally work with coachees? Oh, I don't know if we lost her again.
Can you hear me okay?
Okay, we can hear you now. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, I apologize. I don't really know why the delay is happening, but I do apologize. But I try to basically take the same approach that I would take in software engineering or as a PM, where I take an iterative approach with the candidates I work with. I really assess where they currently are and journey towards management. From there, do an initial evaluation of their background, look at their skill to date and experiences, match on career and personal development, and then while they're doing that, think more about what the different roles of a PM are, where their interests and skill sets fit into the most. And from there, do strategic planning towards not only the application process, but the interview process too. Again, I think we've mentioned this a lot of the PM interview is a rewarding process in itself, where you're going to learn a lot about yourself from a career standpoint, from upskilling on the technical and soft skills, but also more about who you want to be as a person and as a leader. And so I focus a lot of time on that exploration beyond just getting a job, because I really do feel like this is a transformative process where it's going to change not only your career, but who you fundamentally are as a person.
That's so good. I think, yeah, there's so much iteration there and personalization. I think that's a big part of where one-on-one can be so powerful is there's not a perfect formula for everyone, and you have to like figure out what works for the individual. Okay, well, we are basically at time, so we're gonna wrap it up. Amanda is going to be dropping the boot camp winner in the chat. We will then be okay, just dropped it. Nile, looks like you won. Congrats. The Leland team will be reaching out to get you access to the boot camp. And then for everyone else, I believe there's a $500 discount code tonight. And so if you're interested in the PM bootcamp, feel free to use that. And then thank you again to our panelists. You were incredible, Tori and Aaliyah. Honestly, really incredible insights. You can reach out to them if you have any one-on-one questions. I know there was a lot in the chat we weren't able to cover. But that's where like one-on-one coaching can really take in. Okay, well, thank you so much. Let's see some love for the panelists in the chat. And then if you are interested in the recordings, they will be sent to you via email after the event. So you'll all have access to that as well. Great. Thank you. Thank you.